Hi, guys. Welcome to Tomorrow Talk, the podcast that features innovative people to explore cutting edge technologies that are changing our reality as we know it. I am Sabrina Halper, your host, and I'm an investor at Hoff Capital. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Tomorrow Talk. On today's show, we have a very special guest. I will be speaking with Roon. You might know him as @TSizzle on Twitter. He has over 57,000 followers. He really has become a force in tech Twitter over the past couple of years. He really says it as it is. He's been blocked by Mark Andreessen. He's befriended Vitalik. In the past, he's been called a demon summoner, a shape rotator, and a prolific Twitter shitposter by Vice News. You might recognize him as Carlos from the Magic School Bus. That's his profile photo. He's a Twitter pseudonym, and today we get to meet the man behind it all. So please enjoy Roon. Just to kind of begin, I'm curious how you got started, in the Twitterverse. You know, what was the birth of Roon and what brought you on Twitter?
Yeah, so I mean, my account, maybe I shouldn't say this, but hold on, let me think. Okay, but basically, I used to post under my real name, and I was just doing politics stuff, I don't know, it was kind of like you're just doing normie election stuff in 2016, replying to Nate Silver or shit like that, and just trying to. I was really been big into betting on elections, and I was mostly a passive consumer back then. And I think it was really 2019 and really 2020 where, COVID hit. I was insanely bored and I started posting a lot, right? And my stuff started taking off more and more. I probably got 1,000, 2,000, something like that followers then. And even by that time, weird things started happening. People would find my LinkedIn, DM me and be like, "Is this you?" And I was like, "This is kind of uncomfortable. Eventually, someone at work is going to see this, and it's not a good deal." So first I changed the new name Roon, and then I started completely the profile pic changed to the a couple different fake guys. Finally settled on Carlos, which. Now I can't change it anymore. I'm locked in because everyone knows me as a Carlos.
Yeah. No, that's your face, by the way.
Yeah.
We're gonna try to get an AI avatar of Carlos from the Magic School Bus.
Nice.
That's really interesting. I
Exciting.
feel like you must have a pretty natural pulse then on what people find interesting, because most people genuinely struggle to create a Twitter voice that's compelling or even to gain followers. I think compared to other platforms, Twitter is actually pretty hard to hack. You definitely are kind of kill it in at least this niche vertical of really smart kind of edgy people on Twitter. What do you think they like?
Yeah, I mean, not to flatter myself too much, but I actually don't think that my audience is they're smart, but there's a lot of different smart audiences on Twitter, but more specifically they're nerds, they're tech nerds, and they're it started with just engineers, and then slowly it picked up steam with random VCs and people who write about technology for a living, or just writers in general. Matt Iglesias keeps replying to me. I don't know why, but I mean, this is what every good Twitter account is, right? They say things that everybody knows, but are not vocalizing, right? The most viral tweets are the ones that hundreds of thousands of people agree with, but for some reason, they're not commonly said, right?
Because what is your most viral tweet?
It's probably a photo I took of Rahul Ligma. I don't know if you saw that whole prank.
I did.
But, Rahul Ligma and Mr. Daniel Johnson. They're good friends of mine actually. So we're planning pranks and shit all the time. But
yeah. Wait, I look forward to the next one. That was crazy. I don't know. What do you think that says about mainstream media or the story people are searching for right now about Twitter?
Yeah, I think everyone puts their own like narrative spin on it, right? Like they do with
Yeah.
everything. If you have a viral meme, like people start politicizing it immediately. But uh, what it really says is that if you tell the news what they want to hear, like the story that they're fishing for, like they're just gonna run with it. And frankly, there will not be any consequences. Like the lady who did this, like so she's like the CNBC reporter, right? And like she didn't do any fact checking. She like just totally believed this, live tweeted it, and frankly, like nothing will happen to her. In fact, I'm sure she's going to be rewarded for the amount of attention she got, right?
They probably have had such an interesting like few days after that happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Seriously.
I walk around with them and they just get like recognized everywhere. It's a bit much, honestly. Probably kind of
I
scary,
mean,
but
they're like SF celebrities right now. In San Francisco,
definitely.
when
Mhm.
people have come up to them, is it more like awesome dude or is it like you're crazy? What's the general sentiment that they've kind of been receiving?
No, they love them. I think there was a moment there where it could have gone against them, the narrative, like,
Mm.
oh, you guys are spreading fake news and all that shit. But as soon as like Elon came down on their side, I feel like it became just like kosher, funny, good prank, etc.
Yeah,
So like yeah, everyone loves them pretty much.
totally. I could have seen them getting
Mm-hmm.
hate as like people started getting fired like a couple days later a
Mm-hmm.
lot. But
Yeah,
I don't know. I think Elon has this magical touch in a weird way. And like he can get away with
definitely.
so much. I think
Mm-hmm.
because he makes things a joke in a way that a lot of other important people like fail to be able to do too.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think that like without a doubt, he's one of the major reasons why Twitter is so fun and has been fun for like, like long before he ever got an idea of acquiring it, right? Because he's like this powerful guy. He runs several very large companies. Like Tesla's like truly, top $10 trillion company, and um, like he doesn't have a PR department. Like he fired all of them. He just tweets. Like any news he has, he just tweets, and it's like this whole new way of doing things where he's like has such a unique following, like hundreds of millions of followers, that he completely routes around the news media, right? And
Yeah.
it's kind of the same thing that like Kanye does, or like, I mean I don't know, Kanye's gone off the deep end, but
Yeah.
like what Trump did, where like it's like they're native to the internet, they're like really using it to their benefit, and it makes it kind of like a really entertaining show.
It is so entertaining. I am really curious, like, what it'll actually end up being like in 5 years, whether all the
Mhm.
changes he made reflect well on him. Like, how do you think
Yeah.
he's doing right now as a CEO?
Okay. Like, look, I probably the firing or like the layoffs of like 50% of workers. I think that was necessary, and the company was probably like fucked if they didn't do that because they have such massive debt liability now, and like he's like trying his best to get it profitable. The way it was handled, like how he came in, he did this like weird internal like
Think.
secret police investigation. Yeah, the
Mm,
same. All those theatrics were not great because like, it inspires zero confidence in his like Twitter employees, right? Like they're all like this dude has no idea what's going on. He's like kind of callously firing half of us. There's no morale anymore, right? Like even the people that are still there kind of want to quit. Um,
mm.
and I'm sure some people stay enough to like keep it running, but I feel like that's got to take some toll on the employees, and I don't know how quickly like a company like that recovers. But
Yeah.
I think it's been kind of messy, but not like it's not doomed or anything just yet. I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Even like the past few weeks, one of my close friends
Mhm.
works at Twitter and he was like, it's literally just, I know I'm going to get fired in like 2 weeks. And even just imagine having like
Yeah,
a staff of thousands of people that like know they're about to be fired. The office must have
yeah,
been very, very weird over the recent month. And then
hmm,
now it sounds like they're bringing in, a lot of outside people. You said the All In podcast, they,
yeah,
like Jason Calacanis and David Sachs in the
yeah.
Twitter office.
I'm not a big fan of those guys, the All In podcast. I mean, I think they're entertaining. I think they're very entertaining, but like I don't want them running Twitter. Like I don't think they have the right mindset for it. But
What do you think? What is their wrong mindset, would you say?
I feel like their mindset is entirely about like revenge. They're like, oh, we've been wronged for so long by the news media and by like the journalists and whatever. And it's true actually. Like tech journalists, I don't know if you saw this, but Matt Iglesias was tweeting about this. How it was like the top-down internal policy of the New York Times to like just never ever publish anything positive about tech. Like, that was the party line. Like tech is bad, and it's powerful, therefore bad. And so it's like it makes sense for Elon and co to be like really mad at media, but that's not a way to run a company, right? Like that's not. It can't be your your primary preoccupation is like owning the journalists. Um, like I feel like this whole thing about monetizing checkmarks is like idiotic. Like it doesn't. It's not actually going to be a big revenue stream, and it makes it like harder for people, like normal people, to understand like who is the real Nate Silver, who is the real Kanye, or something like that. Like it provides a valuable service, right? It's more valuable to the platform than it is to the individual famous person, at least in my view. So.
Definitely. And if you think about Twitter as like a platform that is inherently dependent on people that are good at creating that content, it basically, it's like it's worse for a viewer or a user that comes in like blind and is mostly there to look at content instead of create it, which is most people on Twitter. It's just harder to find like what's actually good.
No, absolutely. And people made this point, like when Elon was buying Twitter, they're all like, "Oh, like we really want, it would be nice if a Twitter user was running Twitter, right?" And Elon is obviously a prolific Twitter user, but I feel like the mistaken reasoning they made is that like Elon's Twitter experience is so different than what the average Twitter user's experience is, and so like his intuitions actually don't carry that much about like what a good social media platform is.
I know, that's what I was thinking. It's like he's obviously such a special person. He's brilliant and like extremely brilliant, outlier brilliant, and he seems to have this like charisma that I think is very rare for CEOs. People usually have one or the other, or they're like somewhere in the middle instead of being on both ends. But I think he like really has never worked in this space, and it's so different. It's not a rocket ship company. It's not a car company. It's like social media. There's nothing physical about it. So it's just, it'll be like a really interesting experiment. I think if he does a great job, whatever that means, this would make him even more, sort of beloved, and like it could also maybe be like his first kind of like mediocre,
his first fuck up,
failing from the last 10 years,
Right. I completely agree with that. I still somehow feel like he'll pull it out because, never bet against Elon, right? But
definitely.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I don't know. And do you think he's like still very much in the thick of his glory?
I was tweeting about this, right? Like, it seems like he is sort of preoccupied with random shit that's like not, it's sort of tangential to his like actual goals, but at the same time, like I wouldn't I wouldn't presume to know like what he actually does, right? Because people like him do such an astonishing amount of work that it can seem to me like he's obsessed with Twitter and politics and all sorts of shit, and then in real life he spends like 60 hours a week on like real engineering problems at Tesla and SpaceX. That could entirely be true.
My friend that works at Tesla, this is kind of how he seems to like run all of his companies, and it works because like he hires people that can deal with it for sure, but it's like they're finding out news about the company like with everybody else always, and like with the headlines, and like
that's another interesting point, right? Because like, okay, so Tesla and SpaceX, like, he built them essentially from the ground up. So it's like all the workers, the employees there have accepted this social contract where they have this like dictator guy who just says things and they happen. But Twitter isn't like that, right? Like the culture there, the people that join there, they join for different reasons. So like it will be interesting if you can apply this like whole new governance style and it like just works drag and drop like that.
Totally. And if it doesn't, I think he'll just end up like cycling to get like a different group of people working there. I don't think that's his priority, basically, like molding himself into the current culture, But yeah, going into like, I mean, one thing that you kind of blew up for was this whole Wordcell versus shape rotator thing. I'm sure
Sure.
you've spoken about it so much. What's like the general sort of message that, and like dichotomy that you're kind of highlighting?
I feel like the common thread in a lot of tech Twitter, and like a lot of what like I was trying to play into at the time, was definitely this like animosity between like people who consider themselves like hardcore engineers, like technical people, and the so-called like people that write about them, right? Like the journalists or um, people that don't have
The
they don't
actual
get their hands
understanding.
dirty. Yeah, they don't have the actual understanding. They don't get their hands dirty. They're just kind of uh, talking shit at a high level, and which is funny because I am basically a guy that talks shit at a high level, right? Like I don't. I mean, I'm an engineer and a scientist, but like I don't. Um, the things I talk about, I don't actually have that much real world experience with, right? Like I just read about it.
Look, I'm probably a word cell, but I definitely don't shit on the shape rotators. Like I actually think like one of the reasons I even got into podcasting during Stanford is because I was like, wow,
Mhm.
every news article I have ever read about tech is like super negative or it's a
Yeah,
fundraising announcement
yeah,
when there's actually such
yeah,
cool
yeah, yeah.
shit happening.
That's like the market opportunity for people like us, right? Like you and me, like we're not part of the actual media class, but we are able to write or podcast or whatever about the actual stories happening on the ground, groundbreaking things, right? But yeah.
Definitely. I'm excited to read more of your, Substacks coming up. Your first one obviously really blew up. Also, you've tweeted about generative AI.
Mm-hmm.
You work in AI, you know a lot about it. I think right now there's this moment where some people are viewing like
Mm-hmm.
this generative AI hype cycle almost what Web3 was a year ago, where like if you slap
Mm-hmm.
it on your deck, you're going to get a lot more investment. But then at the same time, there's such like really cool innovations happening with it. Do you think it's overhyped or do you see it as like, changing everything and like it's gonna, melt Hollywood and all these things people have been saying recently?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like already like tools like Photoshop are going to change a lot. Like they're going to end up using all this sort of stuff like inherently. Um, and like I don't actually think that it's at the level yet where Hollywood studios are just generating like whole films or whole stills or whole animations from just the prompt, right? Although that's what like people like Stability would like to have you believe. I don't think that it's at that quality yet. But the fact of the matter is that people are pouring like millions or billions of dollars into this, so maybe it will be at that level very shortly. I certainly hope so. I don't think it's like far fetched.
Why do you think like AI has been ignored by some huge VCs? You've tweeted about like Andreessen Horowitz and their kind of
Yeah,
failure to really invest in the space in the
yeah,
past, 10 years.
yeah. I mean, I think I've talked to like not like in person, but I think I talked to Mark about that a little bit, and um, I think he kind of just didn't believe that the current iteration of AI, or like what we think of as language models or machine learning, could actually result in like true intelligence. And I don't think that that's like, a lot of people said that, it's not like an unreasonable claim to make because um, you'd really need to be following things like the scaling hypothesis and scaling laws and like everything that OpenAI has done to really know that no, actually these improvements are like steady. They keep coming. It's like almost like clockwork. As you make the model bigger, the data set bigger, they get smarter. And like that insight probably didn't come to quite a few people until recently. Like with the like you said, like Dolly 2 and stuff. It's so visual, right? It's like hard to deny that there's something going on there.
That makes sense. Yeah, I also think like AI, the like AI industry compared to a lot of other industries in tech, like a lot of the big
Mm-hmm.
breakthroughs either come from like an open AI where it's hard to get insights into it or
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah,
research versus
yeah,
just, founders right out of school that are out and about like preaching about what
right.
they're doing.
It kind of goes against like the classic mindset of Silicon Valley, right? It's like mostly not like like the ideal of Silicon Valley is like these 18, 19-year-olds in a dorm room are making wild shit and then like getting funding. And it's like very distributed. It's like anyone can do it. It's like libertarian. Whereas the reality of AI has been that the people producing many of these like giant improvements have been like trained PhDs, like working in like high funding labs. And it's like very centralized. It's like kind of in the like big companies doing a lot of the work. So that
Yeah.
is another reason why it might be a blind spot for VCs and
Yeah.
such.
That makes sense. In your own work as a developer, like, have you seen crazy changes recently in terms of like being
Uh,
able to sort of use
yeah,
AI?
yeah. I think that like CoPilot, like Dolly is one thing, but CoPilot was the thing for me and most like engineers. I think where they're like, all of a sudden it's like, okay, yeah, like I clearly see why all this investment was worth it. Like we're creating these incredible tools. Um, like in the past, learning a new programming language was like a painful, difficult, like arduous thing, right? Whereas in the new paradigm, it's just like there's no interruption to your mental flow. You're like, I want to do this thing. You write a comment describing the thing, and Copilot will just fill it out for you, or at least like give you like a template, right? And then like you can get it to the end state, the complete state. But uh, the value added is incredible. I think probably they're gonna like increase their prices a lot soon, or like start selling to enterprise or something
Yeah.
like that. But
Do you think in the near
Mhm.
term it's just it'll make people like developers work less, or will it empower them to just like produce a lot more?
That's a good question. So probably I figure that just everyone's output will go up, and they're gonna like keep doing a lot of work. Um, I mean, up until such a point where maybe programmers become like literally obsolete. Like you said, you just type a prompt and
Yeah.
come up with a program.
Yeah.
But
Um, if you think like 100 years of
mhm,
we're in a society where most jobs are
mhm,
highly empowered by some type of AI.
yeah.
Um, what do you think is like in the most dystopian version of
Mhm,
that? Like, what is like
mhm,
the thing that disturbs you the most? And then like the
mhm,
most optimistic version of that, like what's the
mhm.
coolest idea about
Yeah,
that to you?
yeah. I first of all, I want to say it's more like 5 to 10 years and not 100 years.
Yeah.
Um, and then, I mean, the utopian version is that like we actually find a good blend of like I keep trying to tell people about this. Like, just because robots are better than us at most things, or like maybe even if they're better than us at everything, that doesn't mean there's no place for humans, right? Like here's like a crude example, right? The
Yeah.
U.S. produces most things at a higher level of productivity than like Rwanda, right? But that doesn't mean that the U.S. and Rwanda can't trade profitably, because there are some things that are cheaper done in Rwanda than they are here. Um, and it's like the comparative advantage principle. And it's the same thing with AI. Like there's limited AI resources in the world. Like running a prompt on Dali, like it sets like this giant A100 fleet on fire pretty much for a few hours, or like sorry, like a few minutes. Um, and my point being, like, we actually can't run all cognitive processes on AI, even if like AI was human level intelligence, right? Because it's too expensive. And what that means for us is that like we're gonna have things to do. Like where it is efficient for humans to do labor, we're gonna do the labor. And like there's always going to be like a role for humans to do things, and that's like the good outcome, right? Um,
Yeah.
the bad outcome is like runaway AI has no sense for like what humans find valuable. Like erases society, or like turns us into goo, or some crazy shit like that, or like there's some eternal dictator with AI, like that sort of thing. Um, yeah, those would be bad, but I
Well,
don't know.
I
It's hard to
that's
tell.
interesting. Well, we'll see in 5 to 10 years
Mm-hmm.
what society's looking like. Okay, so there's also this idea of like AI generated content. You could definitely create a platform that's just AI generated content once it gets good enough. Um,
Mm-hmm.
do you ever see like Twitter just morphing into that, or is there a space maybe for an entirely different like social media giant to come and do that?
That's a good point. I don't think that you'd need a new social media per se. Um, but I do think that like the latest tools that I've played with are like really convincing at like making full-fledged like paragraphs and articles that sound like vaguely human or not even vaguely human, like pretty much human. I don't think that it would be new platforms. I do think that probably like people are gonna have to get together and like mark that something is AI generated, or else like things go really haywire really quickly, right? Like images that look real. I don't know. Like maybe it's like a fake politician sex tape or something, and then
Yeah.
um,
That so Twitter just created that like that
mm-hmm.
context line now. Um,
Yeah,
could definitely see there being like a context line for AI generated images or content or
right.
videos. But I guess that's going to be a whole nother like technological sort of hurdle is I know there's probably people working on technologies to decipher like what's a
Mm-hmm.
deep fake, but it'll just be like
Yeah,
one of those rat races where both sides are getting better at the same time.
yeah,
Because that's pretty scary.
definitely, 100%. But I think there is like reason to be optimistic, which is that um, like again, training AI models is extremely expensive, right? So it's like platforms like Facebook and Google are the ones that have resources to make these um, like algorithms that detect fakes or like that tag like AI generated language or things like that. But then again, like the Chinese government also has a lot of resources, and they can, if they want, I guess, pump out deep fakes, or the U.S. government even. I'm sure they're not about that. So
Yeah.
uh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure
Yeah,
really, but
totally.
it is promising that basically there's only a few actors in the world that can get their hands on that much compute, right? It will be a different story when, if and when everything is like super cheap to run.
Yeah, that's very true. You mentioned Facebook, and I just wanted to ask you, you tweeted a graph where it showed that
Mm-hmm.
like Meta's VR reality lab has spent like 10 times as much as the
Yeah,
Manhattan Project and is set to spend as much as
it's
the
insane.
Apollo space program, which is crazy. What do you think are the other Manhattan projects of today? You kind of mentioned that like there's so much
Mm.
happening in Silicon Valley that most people don't see.
So I mean, definitely. I mean, Meta is not really secret, right? So it's more like Apollo than it is like, um, than like a
Yeah.
Manhattan Project. But I would say definitely the AI companies are super secretive, like OpenAI. Yeah, like they're pretty secretive, and like they sort of reveal what they're working on, but it's like on a timeline where the technology they reveal is like a year or two behind like what they have behind closed doors, right? Um, so they definitely remind me of like a secretive Manhattan Project type vibe, and also on the same scale of like world impact, right? If what they make becomes real.
What do you think are a couple of the companies in that space right now that you could see becoming like generational huge tech companies?
I think OpenAI is already or is well in the process to becoming like a generational company. I think that Anthropic, which was a OpenAI sort of spin-off, like there's a bunch of people who were there in the beginning, but had differences of vision or philosophy or whatever. Um, they're also going to be super important because they're very good at what is called like model interpretability, meaning like the introspection of models, right? Like we have these giant language models. How do we understand what they're thinking? Like they've gone further down that line of research than everybody else, probably. I am hopeful about Adept, which is like this,
Hmm.
like a few of these very smart people from Google Brain starting this company to make language models like able to use computers, like in a general sense, like use Photoshop and use Excel and use like
Wow.
tools of that nature. And I don't know if they can pull it off, right? Like it's too early to say if they're going to be important or not, or if OpenAI will beat them to that. But in terms of art, by the way, the Stability and Midjourney are probably like we should keep an eye on them at least. Yeah. My buddy Corey has this company Spellbrush, and they do like game asset generative design. I think that stuff is really cool and about to pop off probably. I think it's gonna pop off sooner in like Asia and stuff than it is here because I mean honestly the like Japanese and Korean markets, they play a bunch of these weird games where like, it's kind of expected to have these like sort of keep pumping out new characters to play,
Mm.
and like those characters are like ripe for being plucked by like generative art and generative AI and stuff like that.
That's interesting. How
Mhm.
is like China doing on the AI front? We honest like I actually don't know.
Mm. Um, I frankly I don't know either, but like I have spoken to a bunch of people in the know, and they kind of don't. They're not like scared or anything. Like they don't think that they don't have like language model technology on our scale. I'm not really sure why, um, but like the majority of the best scientists in the world come to the U.S. That's probably part of it, and yeah, like, they just don't have that. They don't have any language models on the scale of like you know GPT-3 or like
Yeah.
you don't see a lot of crazy demos coming out of them, out of their like big companies.
I just want to like ask you some like popcorn questions if you're down with that. I'm
Yeah.
guessing you've met like some pretty interesting, successful people. You've tweeted about hanging
Mhm.
with Vitalik and things like that. These really
Yeah.
brilliant outlier, smart
Uh,
people, do you think they're
mhm.
happy or like what drives them?
Mhm. Um, so I think a lot of them are without a doubt like happier than the average person. They have to be because if they weren't, they wouldn't be able to take like the stresses of the job. Like like normal people when they have like a minor setback in their job, like it like ruins their mood, right? Like it completely fucks them up. Meanwhile, these guys deal with things that are like like horrible. Like when they make a mistake, it's like really bad, right? And yet they're able to keep going and like keep trucking. I mean, there's obviously a lot of differences. Like Vitalik is very,
Yeah.
very different than like Sam Altman or something, but just very high tendency for action or like bias for action. Like they'd rather do something than not. Like they see some like vague, far off threat and they start preparing for it rather than like just letting it be.
The other question around that is like, do you need to
Mm-hmm.
be unsatisfied to always be like hungry to like create the next big
Mm-hmm.
thing? Or can you just be super curious and
Mm-hmm.
motivated out of a place of like happiness and excitement?
I think that really depends on the person. Like there are many people that there's strivers because of like some deep like um, some emotion that we don't generally associate with happiness, right? Like some people just really want like revenge, like to prove their enemies wrong, and they actually become wildly successful just because of their drive for revenge. The people I've met, like on the other side of the spectrum, like most of the people in Silicon Valley seem to be driven more by like like actual, first of all, curiosity, like you said. They're not satisfied per se, but they are like happy people. Vitalik, for example, just seemed contemplative, like very intellectually curious, um, and like interested in how he can change the world through like ideas alone, like just like, kind of scholarly almost.
How is life in SF? Like, do you think, obviously during COVID, a lot of people left,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people lost faith in the Bay. Do you believe like the Bay Area is still the place to be if you want to be at the forefront of these like really cutting edge industries?
Yeah, like quite frankly, I love New York, but the New York is the only real city in this country, by the way. Like, there's just nothing else that comes close to the, um, just the density level of excitement, like amount of things happening, like amazing architecture and all that. But um, in terms of like the kind of conversations I have, they're almost like always more interesting in San Francisco. Uh,
Yeah.
the people are stranger. I want to say, on average, they're like kind of smarter, and they're like really, really into what they do. Whereas in other cities, it seems kind of like mercenary, right? Like they, people are doing things for other reasons, like they want to get rich or whatever. But the SF people, at least they pretend to really care about what they do. So that makes for interesting conversation, at least. And then the other thing is that there are a few other contenders. Like they tried to make Austin a thing, they tried to make Miami a thing, and like nothing has happened there, right? Like Miami fell off as crypto fell off.
I
Nothing.
think
Maybe
Austin's
Austin.
Austin's already dying, in my opinion. I know
Yeah,
so
yeah.
many people that left in the last 5 months. I think it's
Hmm.
awesome, but it's like a town. Really, it's not a city
Yeah,
yet.
and they
Yeah.
already hate like the people coming in. Like they already have this sort of resentment and I don't want to develop any more mentality. So like that,
Yeah.
it's not some replacement. And on top of all those things, SF has this like AI boom, which like obviously in my opinion is going to be the only important, like, or by far the most important industry of the next 5 years or so,
Yeah.
or I don't know, maybe forever, depending on how impactful AI turns out to be. So like for all those reasons, I really, I don't, I think it's like by far first place.
Definitely. I'm curious to hear the ways that developing Roon under a pseudonym has actually like come to
Uh,
impact your physical life.
so I actually feel like I get all the benefits I want without like a lot of major disadvantages. Um,
Mm.
like it feels kind of like a cool like a secret identity, right? Like I'll go meet someone that I know is like important at a party, and I'm like, oh, I know this guy, I know him from Twitter. And I'll be like, take him aside. I'm like, by the way, I'm Roon, and they're like, oh yeah, you're that guy, and then we have like this rapport instantly, right? Um,
Mm.
so like I get to know the people I want to know without some you know annoying like constant thing about it. Plus, frankly, it just wouldn't have worked if I wasn't pseudonymous. Like the mystery is what makes it good, and
A
like
thousand percent.
the internet sort of internet native, right? Like, this is the whole thing. Like you can't really say what you want unless you're pseudonymous.
Definitely. And are there even more controversial things that you wish you could say, but now that like you have a following and it's not a random pseudonymous account with like
Yeah.
500 followers that you can't say anymore?
Oh, for sure. I censor myself all the time. Like, one thing, I can't really directly insult like major tech people anymore. Like, I used to be able to, but now they're like, they're just gonna show up in my replies, like block me or something. Um, so yeah, I can't like just make fun of like, I don't know. Like yesterday, I had a mean tweet about like Jason Calacanis, and I like instantly deleted it. I was like, this is a bad idea. So yeah, things like that.
I saw Mark Andreessen blocked you. This podcast was like birthed out of the idea of like exposing people to the very exciting things going on in
Hmm.
technology right now. What makes you think that like the world
Hmm.
might be actually way better and the human experience might be way better for us in the future than it is
Yeah,
today?
I think first of all, like computers keep getting better, which means like we are able to automate more boring stuff and do more crazy like consumer experiences for people, right, than we were before. And like that trend line, as it continues, it's generally good. I think some people may disagree. Some people think that phones and computers have been bad for the world, but I really don't think so. I think the internet in particular has been like incredibly beneficial for um, like humanity generally, right? Like you always hear the sob stories and you never hear the things that are like good about the internet. Like you never
Yeah.
hear about how, I don't know, like Facebook connected like long lost relatives or things like that. Obviously, my main thing is just like AI, right? Like I think in the near future, we are going to become like a much more wealthy, like much more like friendly, like sort of smoother civilization than we were before, because we're just going to automate an insane amount of boring, laborious, like kind of painful work, and um, you know, make like make everything faster and better in like a step change kind of way, right? Um, so that's another major reason to be hopeful. So yeah.
Yeah. Roon, thank you so much for
Mm-hmm.
coming on the show today. It was really a pleasure and honor to have you.
Yeah.
Everyone should follow at T-Sizzle. It's really like such a fun account to follow, genuinely, and it actually makes me think about things differently a lot. I sometimes wonder like if you have influencer burnout, because every influencer talks about like the need to always be creating content. Anyway, you're doing a great job.
I thank you. I don't have burnout because I don't take it seriously. So that's a
Yeah.
secret. Don't take it seriously.